it kind of works in a triangle. So I look at it like this. We have certain thoughts. Every time we have a thought, that thought impacts and triggers our emotions. And then after it impacts and triggers our emotions, it impacts and triggers our behaviors.
Yes.
So whenever it is unwanted in a space that you don't want to be in, then that's how you know that you're dealing with something from your thought process that's triggering you in ways that you don't want to be.
Thanks for tuning in to the Money Therapy Journal. Remember, anything that you take care of will become more beautiful, including your money. Today, I have one of my close friends here with me today. She is a mental health therapist, so there isn't anyone else that I think would be insightful in the way that she is in helping me tie together the concepts of money as it relates to behavior as well as budgeting. So we're going to bring her in today.
Hey, girl, hey.
That's so you. That's so you. Okay, so if you guys notice a bit of familiarity between me and Stephanie, that's largely because we have known each other since college. So this conversation is going to be very rich. It is going to be filled with a lot of takeaways. I think our friendship over the 20 years that we've been friends, we've had the opportunity to really get to know each other. And then we have our fair share of money talks as well.
Yep.
Yeah, we do. If you guys notice a bit of familiarity between me and Stephanie, that's largely because we have known each other since college. So this conversation is going to be very rich. It is going to be filled with a lot of takeaways. I think our friendship over the 20 years that we've been friends, we've had the opportunity to really get to know each other. And then we have our fair share of money talks as well.
Yep.
Yeah, we do.
I help. You help me.
Yeah, we help each other. Totally. Okay, so Stephanie, in the you've been a licensed therapist. I forget. Has it been 5 years or has it been 8 years? How long has it been now?
Therapist altogether or licensed?
Licensed.
Maybe the last 2 years.
Okay, so the last 2 years, but you've been practicing for how long?
12 years.
Okay, so 12 years in total. That's why I mixed it all together. Okay, so mix it all together. And when we talk about this, and the good thing is that Stephanie and I, we send clients back and forth to each other because we begin to notice different patterns. Stephanie, I'll let you kind of share some of the mental patterns where you feel like, okay, I think this person needs a Shawnee. Tell me about some of the patterns that you start hearing when you're talking to the mental patterns.
Yeah. So a lot of it is the coping strategy. So how someone copes with their mental. So when I see that someone is coping by wanting to fill a void or fill a space, by overspending, or by using those coping mechanisms to retail therapy is a big one.
Yeah.
So whenever I see a pattern of, okay, I see a wanting to fill a void, wanting to fill a space due to feelings of anxiety, due to feelings of some type of depression, that's typically when I say, okay, a Shawnee needs to be involved in this situation. Yep.
Okay. So you identifying like someone largely using overspending as a way to kind of cope with anxiety, depression, or to fill a void. Typically, when I know that one of my clients has moved beyond in terms of just like budgeting, and now it's more behavioral, someone who's like, I would consider their impulses to be off, whereas in they are impulsively spending. So let's say we set a budget and we say, okay, this is what your income is. These are your expenses. This is how much you have left over. And then over the period that we're working together, I'm just noticing that they're kind of squandering. So I know at that particular time that this really isn't mathematical. This may be a little bit more emotional. Yeah. So that's when I see it. Also, some of my clients that in ways, and I'd like for you to be able to help me to be able to identify when someone is anxious. And sometimes the anxiety is not necessarily stemming from financial, it's just these two areas starting to like connect. So can you help me understand like how you are able to identify that someone is experiencing experiencing anxiety?
Yeah. So it always stems from the emotions. So you look at the emotions and you look at the behaviors. So once you can't really see emotions, just like you can't see thoughts, but what you can see is the display of behaviors.
Yeah.
That is on clear display. You know, so when you see certain behaviors on display, like for instance, impulsivity or a poor decision making or you know, feeling the need to, like I said, fill a space, making decisions that they won't typically make, dishonoring their own values in certain ways. That's typically how you know someone is dealing with some level of, you know, anxiety.
Okay.
So anxiety, it looks like fears, you know, any type of fear that a person may be experiencing that triggers in their emotions. And then after it triggers in their emotions, it triggers then in their behaviors. So when you see a certain display of behaviors, of unwanted behaviors or unwanted emotions, it kind of works in a triangle. So I look at it like this. We have certain thoughts. Every time we have a thought, that thought impacts and triggers our emotions. And then after it impacts and triggers our emotions, it impacts and triggers our behaviors.
Yes.
So whenever it is unwanted in a space that you don't want to be in, then that's how you know that you're dealing with something from your thought process that's triggering you in ways that you don't want to be. So those are all signs that you can become aware of someone is dealing with some level of anxiety because it shows up in your behaviors. So how does anxiety show up sometimes? Sometimes anxiety shows up by impulsivity. Sometimes anxiety shows up in fears. Sometimes anxiety shows up in certain moods. You know, irritability. You know, there's a bunch of different behaviors where anxiety.
Yeah, I think you did a really good job in just being able to kind of concentrate because right now some words are very much so cliche, right? They're very much so cliche and they're widely overused. So typically the word anxiety is being used, even if you're just having like a negative emotion, right? But there is a big difference between having a negative emotion and then you feeling anxious, right? And then that anxiety playing out in your finances. So to clarify, for me, the way how I can notice that the individual or even myself, I get really good at recognizing, you know, anxiousness within myself surrounding money or anxiousness stemming from some other part of my life now having an impact on the way that I make financial decisions. So there's two ways for it to happen.
100%.
So the anxiety that I might notice inside of myself, like if I'm in the store and let's say I formed an agreement with myself and I said, okay, when we come into the store today, we're going to spend $200. And then that bit in my anxious spot is right here, like on my neck, like in my neck and my shoulder. Like I know like you're doing something you don't have any business doing at this particular time. You're doing something you have absolutely no business doing. So I can feel that bit of anxiety within like right inside of my neck. Another way that I might experience anxiety is an unexpected cost, right? So I, again, like just going back and forth, like remember when we were shopping for a car for you, remember we went through that process of shopping for a car for you and we would experience, although you're a therapist, you know, and although you've bought many cars before, it's just making new decisions, you know what I'm saying? And what that kind of comes with.
And a lot of it also comes from the fear of maybe not wanting to make a mistake, which is something that we really have to dive into. And another type of anxiety, a huge one, is avoidance.
Okay, let's break both of those down. So one, you can experience anxiety when you have fear surrounding the outcome of the decision that you're making. Can you talk a little bit more about that? Because that's something that I see as well.
Totally. So when you talk about, let's say someone made a past mistake, right? They made a past mistake and they're trying to resist making that mistake again. And a lot of times that's where the anxiety come in, is a fear of, I don't want to make the same mistake again. Or it could be a fear that I don't trust myself to make the right decision for myself. And once you get into these spaces, obviously it's going to create a level of anxiety. And I think what's important to recognize is we have to be able to to not become resistant to life and mistakes.
Yeah, I like that. So to break that down, that's really, really good. So where I see that particular behavior is individuals who have gotten themselves out of debt. I have clients that I've helped get out of $10, $15, $20,000 in debt. And so they become very, very anxious at the sight of any type of debt. Those that have coped with job loss, those that have been out of jobs for a period of time, even entrepreneurs, with them going through different levels. So it's really good. Sometimes people are feeling like they're so bad with money, and that's why this is so important to me. Sometimes you are bad with money, and sometimes you're very anxious, and that anxiousness that you're experiencing is causing you to be bad with money.
100%. So recognizing that, okay, it's a resistance of, I don't ever want to get back into that space again. And once you have that level of resistance, you may not get back into that space, but you're also creating other things to happen. Like you're not allowing yourself to enjoy life. You're not allowing yourself to enjoy your money. So you may be getting yourself out of one space, but you're getting yourself into another space. And that's what anxiety could create. And I see this playing out in relationships all the time, where it's kind of like, okay, don't spend anything. I'm never going to go back there again. But I don't know how to enjoy. I don't know how to relax. I don't know how to balance out life and work.
So the good thing, the triggering about these types of conversations, and sometimes people will say, well, Shawnee, you're so good at this. How are you so good at this? Because I'm good at myself. Like I'm my first client. I'm good at myself. And when you were saying that, do you remember how long it took for me to actually allow myself to buy a new car? Right? I went through this whole process for maybe about 3 years where I just did not buy a car. And every time you would check in with me, I was like, oh no, I'm shopping, I'm looking, whatever the case may be. Now, a large part, and I'm sure that people are experiencing this, a large part of just the cost of purchasing cars are just very different than they were 4 years ago. So even me, who's well equipped to fully negotiate, I sold cars before, even when it was time for me to actually press hard and sign here, I found myself just to be a little bit more anxious just because the cost of things are just a little bit more expensive. So that's going to create anxiety. The other thing is that my anxiety was also being backed by the fact that I had gotten into a car accident, right? And so the car accident, so that was also playing a role in when was I going to allow myself to move forward, right? When was I going to accept, hey, this is something that happened to me. How now can I create some different possibilities for myself? So the next half, I want to kind of talk about, we've done quite a bit of dollar diagnosing, if you will, but let's try to talk about, I think you've already given us one gift, is to be able to recognize when you are experiencing some level of anxiety. What would you kind of recommend if someone is experiencing anxiety, either being triggered by, a unwanted or sporadic financial decision, or they've just anxious from some other space and it's coming over into their finances?
So the first thing you have to do is, number one, like you said, recognize. Once you recognize, you have to remove the resistance of life. Life happens in ebbs and flows. It goes up, it goes down. And a lot of times when we are trying to actively resist something, I'm not going to get into a car accident again. I am not going to be broke again. I'm never going to be homeless again. You're actively putting up a resistance. You're actively putting up a wall.
So I hear the verbiage of the resistance, but can you help me understand? Because I can hear the mental, and again, we cannot see these thoughts, but the behavior of that looks like, what would we say someone that their driving thought is, I don't ever want to get broke again? How does their behavior look when that's the thought?
Not allowing themselves to enjoy and spend money. Stopping themselves from getting things that they need. Not so much of what they want, but they will even resist getting what they need.
I had that once. So one of my clients, that she had finally got her tax return. And I think from a societal space, we do a good job of forcing judgments on each other when it comes to what it is that we buy. So we have the social space to navigate. And then we also have, our previous experiences. And so she had gotten maybe about $8,000 to $10,000 back from her tax return. And so I had her to begin to list out what are some of the things that she was going to do. And so she said, oh, I'm going to pay this off. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. And she said, Shawnee, I have to ask you one thing. And I said, what is it? She said, I need to buy myself some glasses. I said, you have to allow yourself to purchase these $200 glasses.
Totally.
You need these for sight. You need to see your children. You need to drive to work. So that's ways to be able to recognize you're not allowing yourself to move forward.
Because it's irrational.
Okay.
It's irrational. And even times where it's kind of like, I know I need certain things from the grocery store. Oh, I'll get them later. I won't get them right now. And so you're trying to, once again, you put up this blockage to avoid having to overspend even things that you're actually going to need.
Okay.
That's just one sign. That's
okay.
One.
So another thing that I like for my clients to do when I'm starting to recognize that this is largely not having anything to do with just your spending, it's having to do with your psychology attached to money.
Yep.
So my client would constantly overspend when she went into the grocery store. She would spend maybe anywhere between $400 and $500 a week. I do think that the cost of groceries has, definitely gotten more expensive, but $400 to $500 is still excessive.
Totally.
And so what I start having her to do, because I would see this kind of like from week to week, I would kind of see like, this is so inflated. What are you buying? So I would have her to start to count, Stephanie, to take her out of what you're talking about, this irrational mind. And Stephanie, she had maybe, I think like 20 boxes of cereal. She had 20 boxes of cereal. And I'd say, open up the freezer. And I said, well, how many packages of chicken do you have in there? She said, I have maybe about 15 packages of chicken. I said, why are you buying so excessively? Why are you essentially not eating what you kill? And she started telling me about a period of time where she had starved. She was pregnant, and during that period of time, she didn't have access to food and all these kind of things. So one of the ways that she got herself to kind of repair from that is now that she can afford food, she overspends when it comes to food.
Totally. A fear of not having.
Yeah.
Fear of not having, which is the opposite spectrum of the fear of going back into debt. This is how hoarders come about.
Yeah.
They hoard things in fear that just in case I'm going to need it, let me try to hoard everything, which is another example of what anxiety looks like. It's another behavior of how it presents itself.
Can we begin to see this? And you would have to clarify this for me. Can we see some of this stuff in the mind? Because what you just said, can we begin to kind of attach some of this hoarding to, in your mind, maybe we as an onlooker see this as hoarding, but maybe it's a level of protection that you feel you're creating. Maybe not actually, but you kind of feel, you start thinking that if I have all of this, now I'm protected.
Yeah, I'm keeping myself safe.
Yeah, it's a safety measure.
That's what it is. It's a safety mechanism. I'm keeping myself safe. This is how I can protect myself. This is how I can prevent from me experiencing what I experienced before.
Again, got it.
It's irrational.
Got it. It is.
Yes, it is a protection mechanism, but it's still irrational.
Yeah, it is. And I think you're being able to connect that language in terms of some of your spending. And even in this way, even when you don't get to hoarding, like sometimes some of my clients who really love like luxury items, they love luxury items. That's fine. You have your this and your that. But once I begin to see, like if I'm looking at your budget and I'm seeing like consistently you're spending $1,500 on a purse, you're spending $3,000, and then I'm looking at your deficits, savings capacities. So I'll start to make you look, well, can you count how many bags you have? Oh, well, I have 20. You have 20 bags? How many pairs of shoes do you have? Oh, well, I have 80. So I think so just for those that are listening in, to bring yourself out of the space of feeling a little irrational is to get into measuring.
Yes.
Get into measuring. Get into math. Counting will bring you out of that space. It'll stop me. And sometimes that's one of the ways that I control my spending. Like I'll have one very nice thing and that stops me from having 10, 12, 15, 20 of that thing.
But at the same time, sit with yourself and you have to ask yourself, okay, my first question to this person will be, what are you trying to feel? What void, what need are you trying to fill?
So even as a therapist, Stephanie, when you ask someone that head on like that, how long do you have to, because sometimes emotionally we can be hidden, right? So I can ask you, what are these kind of things helping you? And that might take me maybe about 6 times to talk to you before you're able to really be able to connect with what is this about?
100%.
Because sometimes you're competing with yourself. siblings.
Yep.
Sometimes it's the women at your job.
Yep.
Sometimes it's the little girl that didn't get to have. So sometimes people, even when you ask people, what are you trying to feel? Like, they're like, what do you mean?
Exactly. And that's exactly what they should be like. What do you mean? What are you asking me? And here's the thing. People have to get used to sitting with themselves and figuring these things out.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because if I give it to you soft, then you're not going to know what to do with that either.
Yeah.
But you have to be able to recognize there's something there's a reward attached to this. What is the reward that's attached to the behavior? What are you getting from this? What are you feeling? What is the void that's being filled? Because if it was not a reward attached to it, then you wouldn't be doing it.
Yeah, no, you would not. Even your illogical behavior would stop doing it because you're not getting that reward. But sometimes it's a this to a that, right? So on the surface level, one time I was talking to one of my clients, she was nearing retirement.
Yep.
And so I looked at how much money she had saved up. And then I asked her, we started helping her shop for a car. And she's like, well, I'm going to get this car right here. I said, I don't think you should buy that car.
Yeah.
It's a BMW, blah, 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 blah. I don't think you could afford that right now. She says, and it took a little bit of time because sometimes it's hard for people to really admit that they're really in competition with other people, which is not very hard in this social space where we can, years ago, you can compare to maybe 5 of your neighbors. Now you have maybe about 50,000 people that you can look at and feel some level of inadequacy
Most
about.
definitely.
So she said, I'm buying this car. My brother isn't the only one who can have this, but so maybe you felt the reward is that now I'm on par with my brother, but in the interim, you also would like to retire and you don't have enough, savings. So at what level are you willing to kind of like sacrifice to maintain this level of competitiveness?
At the end of the day, it's all a reflection of your relationship with yourself. That's what it boils down to.
Yeah.
Because whenever you are in a space where you have something to prove, which is this exact same space that you're referring to, when you have something to prove, there's something on the inside of you that yourself is not even convinced.
Yeah.
So it's sitting with yourself. And this is why I ask these direct questions. And sometimes I do get the blank, like, what do you mean? What are you asking me? Sit with yourself for a little while.
So you'll give them, so a part of your work with them is to ask them these head-on questions and then give them a pause.
And they can take as long as you need to, even if it's a week. Sit with yourself, because a lot of times, I could, give you some responses and some answers, but then you're not going to take the opportunity to sit with yourself to kind of figure those things out, because that has to be a practice. This is not something that you can just come to somebody, get the answers. No, you have to practice being able to self-identify certain behaviors that you are getting yourself into that you're going to also have to get yourself out of.
Yeah.
So it takes sitting with yourself. It takes not knowing how to answer a question. It's okay.
Yeah. I like that research process with myself, right? And I also like to go through the process of not knowing, like I know that I feel this particular thing. I'm not really sure what's driving this, and I'll start like writing down my behavior, because I like to track myself, that's how I get good at looking, because I'm good at looking at myself to kind of see like, why are you doing this?
Exactly.
Why are you buying this again? Just watching the repetition of behaviors. Okay. So we've been able to identify a few behaviors. Some of the copings that you have recommended is obviously bringing yourself into awareness, sitting with yourself. I came up with a measuring. Anything else that you would kind of give as a way to help people to kind of ground themselves emotionally if they're finding that they're not where they want to be financially?
Yeah. And I'm going to go back to the point that we hit on earlier. Don't put up a resistance. It is okay to make mistakes. It is okay to quote unquote fail, which I don't think is actually failing. I think it's growing. I think it's learning. I think it's developing, for the next time around. If we give ourselves space to make these type of mistakes, then we are allowing ourselves to, like I said, learn, grow, and develop. Whenever we resist life as it wants to happen to us, we are resisting the natural ebbs and flows of life.
Yeah, the growth. We're stopping the growth process.
But the thing about an ebb is it gives momentum to the next flow.
Yeah.
So if you're resisting the ebb, how are you getting just
That's
like
really
you are
good, Stephanie.
keeping things out?
Mm-hmm.
You are also keeping the good things in
Yeah.
from coming in.
Yeah.
So that ebb gives us momentum for the next flow.
Yeah.
So if you try to resist that, you're not going to be able to experience that flow.
Okay, so because we have to, that's really good in the mental space of someone who's saying, okay, I feel that I'm bad with money. So because I feel that I'm bad with money, I'm just going to keep it all to myself and I'm not going to buy anything. I'm not going to try investing in the stock market. I'm not going to see what that life insurance policy would be like. I'm not going to look into becoming a homeowner. I'm so scared. I'm looking at the economy. So that's what they tell themselves. So you're saying, hey, allow yourself to get into the groove of things. Make one decision that's going to lead you to another one.
Don't feel the need to be so in control.
Okay, so Stephanie, that kind of works in the psych space, and I get you, I hear you, right? But then there's individuals that are dealing with foreclosure, right?
Yep.
They're dealing with repossession. So I cannot say go with the flow because the flow might be the car.
I hear you. But this is why we have people like you.
Yes. So even with, and I know that was in that particular way, if we're saying to individuals where we're dealing with credit card debt, right?
Yep.
We're dealing with large amounts of credit card debt. We're facing foreclosures. We're facing kind of repossessions. We're facing job loss and things like that. So going with the flow of that, if we really got into that conversation, going with the flow of it is learning. Right?
Yeah.
Part of your flow is a learning space. Looking at the amount of debt that you have created, whether it's $2,500 or if you're more on par with the national average of $10,000. It's allowing yourself to disconnect from the avoidance, right? And that is a part of flow.
100%.
Letting that avoidance go and saying, hey, because what happens when you only avoid it and you're not getting into whatever that flow is? Like sometimes the flow of those particular transactions is calling the individual and saying, hey, I was late. That's a part of the flow.
100%. And it's so small, but it's so impactful at the same time.
It is.
Because if you don't do that, then you're allowing yourself more to get into more debt, into more financial trouble, and more bankruptcy, more repossessions. Because something so small. Look, computer and phone avoidance is real.
It is very much so,
it
especially right now
thing.
while we live in the abundance of it. So all this beeping, all of these alerts, constant needing to be able to communicate, it is very easy to avoid. So I do I'll take a money word and say, get into your cash flow.
I remember being in such a horrible financial space. Whenever the phone rung, I got anxious.
Right.
Just for a phone, I didn't even have to look at the call.
You didn't even know the number. Just the phone.
It didn't
ringing.
matter. I already knew it was somebody asking for money. It didn't even matter who it was. And that put me in a space of being anxious all alone. But if I would have been able to just go with the flow and answer the phone, but like, look, I can't pay you today. But if you give me a couple of weeks, I'll be able to give you this. That would have lessened my consequences.
It would have lessened
drastically.
It would have lessened your consequences, possibly, depending on, because sometimes, unfortunately, when you're dealing with some of these creditors, they don't always have the best systems.
They don't always clear.
But you also are able to kind of face it head on and minimize your anxiety, right? So even if you're dealing with something as harsh as like a repossession, when you answer the phone, it's like, okay, well, you're not coming today. So I have the car for another 3 days, right? So I can make a decision to be able to go forward. And then some of my clients that I am coaching through that magnitude of loss is sometimes helping you to look back to, okay, what are some of the things? Like, first of all, maybe you should not have gotten this car in the first place, right? That's
the learning lesson,
That's
right?
the learning
That's
lesson.
the growth.
Even though it's not really cool, like maybe you should not have gotten the 750. And because I shop for cars for so long, I know that it's not really, the average car right now is $700. That's the average car payment right now in America. So it's really not that easy to avoid the car trap, right? So that is a part of this, this part. Also being in the flow is just having some information coming in, but so that you can have research, but not overly exposing yourself to information as well.
Yeah, it's being smart. It's being smart. It's not being irrational. That's what I'm hinting to. You don't want to be in a rational space. So whatever you need to do to get yourself into that rational space of, okay, this is the situation.
Yep.
This is what I'm dealing with. This is what it is. Now, what do I need to do? What steps do I need to make to make this a better situation for myself?
Have you seen, because have you seen where even, because that would be, at a base space that I think that even yourself as a therapist may go in and out of, just because outside of you being a licensed therapist, you're also a human being having to make financial transactions. So you kind of go in and out, which is fine. I think that's normal to go in and out of these spaces where you just feel a little bit more anxious than you would not. I think that's kind of normal.
Yep.
I think the other thing that you're kind of classifying that will make it a little bit different than just kind of feeling irritable towards finances is over a long period of time where you just do not do anything, right? Yeah, because then that will be a level of what we would say like a level of depression directly attached to your finances. So how are we able to kind of be able to recognize when we're kind of on that sliding scale from just a normalcy of feeling a little irritable, but now I'm feeling like depressed? What are some ways to be able to identify that I think I might be a little financially depressed?
Yeah, like you just said, avoidance. Not doing anything. I'm not making any decision. I know that this is hurting me. I know this is hurting my finances, but I'm going to choose to completely avoid it altogether. That is one.
How do we define depression, though? Because I also think that's a word that we kind of sometimes overuse, either where we don't say it or we say it too much. How would you, as a therapist, how would you classify depression?
So depression is anything that slows you down. It slows you down from your everyday functioning. So you as an individual know how you function. You know how you function. I know how I function. Whenever you see that starting to become slowed down mentally, physically, emotionally, when you're not able to function in your capacity to typically be able to function, you're dealing with some level of depression.
Okay.
And every depression is not like, a major depression. Sometimes it could be sadness. Sometimes it could be grief. Sometimes it could be mild. Sometimes it could be a little bit more moderate. Sometimes it could be severe. So that's kind of, if you're dealing with something severe, obviously seek help. But you can also see it in the mild or moderate ways when okay, I am not functioning to my fullest capacity. Mentally, physically, emotionally.
Okay. So one of the ways individuals might be able to identify that you normally pay your bills on time, but now you're not paying them on time.
Yes, you're starting to slow down
You're starting to slow down on paying them at times. You typically would have a little bit more energy to look for a part-time job or to do some entrepreneurial work and things like that. But now
lack of motivation.
Lack of motivation is a way that you would be able to see that. Maybe you did want to go back to college because you did find this particular class or this particular course, but now you're just deciding that over a long period of time, I'm unmotivated to do this.
Yeah, not knowing how to make certain decisions.
Okay.
For yourself, or just a overall lack of motivation. It's a slower process. Like I'm not able to move or function in the way, and it could be as severe as waking up is a huge task.
Okay.
Small things seem like daunting tasks.
Okay.
That's typically when you're dealing with more of the severe side of what that looks like.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I kind of think in like a period of time where you and I were in college together. I don't know if you remember, but I lost my godmother. I don't know if you remember when I lost my godmother. So I did it. That probably will be the one time that I would say that I was like chronically like depressed, and me personally that I'm like always class, this, that, doing a million things, great, tons of energy. But during that period of time, I just stayed in my room for a period of time. I don't know if you saw me. I don't know if anybody particularly saw me. So I knew that I went through that particular period. And that was like the only time in my life, even though I've had a myriad of experiences, that was the only time that I would say that, hey, I even went so much so that I even went to go and deal with a campus therapist. That's just how much that I, that's how much it was overwhelming me. More so in my adult life where I have more responsibilities, and I don't know this term as well as you would know, but there is another term outside of where it's a level of depression, but like you're hyper, it's like you have like this hyper focus so that you avoid the depression. So you're kind of like hyperactivity.
Manic?
Is
that what you're referring
That's a little far. I wasn't looking for manic.
Somewhere in between, a spectrum.
close that in just a little. Maybe yes. No, I'll look for it and then I'll give it back to you.
Okay.
But I know before, sometimes like the body, I experienced
Mhm.
this before.
Yep.
I don't have like the jargon to describe it, but I do recall a period of time, like again, going back to that car accident,
Mhm.
I was so afraid because I was dealing with so much PTSD
Yep.
that I would not allow myself to go into a depression. That in some ways, I guess you would say it was a level of mania. I would say it was a level of mania because I worked more than like I had ever. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah,
because I knew that I felt like, okay, because of the PTSD that I'm
Yep.
dealing with, I felt like if I gave myself over to it,
Yeah.
then I would not, I would not be able to recover. I
Totally.
also recall like one of my other clients at one point, she was like homeless. I can't remember, like in her teens, she was like homeless.
Mhm.
So one of the ways that she was balancing out this, she had 2 6-figure jobs.
Okay.
2,
Mhm.
like she would log off one and get onto the other, and
Yep.
this is just there was just no space between. So there's this space, and you would say there's no other word. It's a little manic.
I understand the space that you're trying to keep yourself out of.
Okay.
And a lot of people respond by coping, whether that be exercise, whether that be getting themselves into certain circles or environments to not let themselves go back, slip into that space.
Okay.
Now, the term
We'll
is not
find
coming
it.
to me.
We'll find it.
Once we do, we'll
find
talk
it.
about it.
So even when whatever that space is, so wherever you are on that particular spectrum, whether if you're far on the space of like you're depressed and you're completely unmotivated, but like how you said, one way is to be able to understand yourself if some of your behavior is irrational.
Yep.
So if you're like completely unmotivated, but if you're so like, there's individuals, and I've lived out that part of myself where like it's not just extra, like you're really overdoing it in terms of your action and you're exerting. So it is a level of irrational, as well, to be, you can just be hyper focused, just not knowing how to sit, not how to rest, not how to do this. So it that too is a level of avoidance.
Totally.
Yeah.
Overworking.
Yeah.
People who pour into their jobs and then stop and don't have that balance. Yeah, that would be considered what you're.
Yeah, that would
whatever
be
term.
Yeah,
that
whatever term it is. But we got the behavior. Sometimes we don't need the label, and sometimes I think we over label, which is probably why I left the term so that I didn't deal with the label, so that I can address the behavior.
Yeah.
Right? It's better to address the behavior
100%.
before you even label it, because once you start labeling it,
The label don't even matter.
It doesn't.
Once you become aware of what's going on and you know what you're using to cope, because that's all it is a coping mechanism. And some coping mechanisms can be healthy and unhealthy.
Yeah.
But once you recognize, okay, I'm implementing an unhealthy coping mechanism, then that's the time to go get help, to do something about it.
Yeah. So what does help look like? Can you identify some help? Because we talked about self-coping, things that you can do within yourself and for yourself. Even so much that there's times that I'll, like when I was like really, reshaping my relationship with money, like I would have to leave stuff at the register. Like I would have to leave it, like it'd be $500 worth of stuff, and I just like leave it. I'm so sorry. I apologize. Because like my natural behavior of whatever it was, maybe it was just typical or whatever the case may be, just leave it, right? Sometimes the mind needs a disruption, right?
Yeah,
if you made an agreement with yourself before you came in, sometimes you can text a friend too. You can text a friend before and say, hey, before I get ready to go into the store, I'm going to spend $300. If I spend over that $300, and that's something that I tell my clients that are overspender around the holidays.
Yeah.
Like, cool. Text someone how much you're going to spend. It doesn't have to be me, but text the person before you go into the store. I'm only spending $300.
Yep.
So those are just some self-coping things, but how would someone be able to identify that, okay, so I think at this particular time, I would need a higher level of just what I'm doing for myself. I need a professional to help me maneuver through some of these things.
Yeah, and hopefully you will come to a professional, because that's step one. It's not always easy to say, okay, I'm going to involve a professional. It could be a money thing. It could be so many different things. But hopefully a great step would be to even come to a professional. That's good in and of itself. If you don't go to a professional, then at least reach out to someone who you can trust. A parent, a coworker, anyone who you can trust, and say, hey, look, I'm dealing with this. Can you help me through this? Or can I at least talk about it to you, where maybe they can share some tips? Honestly, I think we all go through spaces. If you've reached a certain point, we all have seen and gone through certain spaces where we financial spaces or sad grief spaces or depression or some level of anxiety. We've all experienced it before. So you want to be able to go to someone who can at least relate to that experience, and maybe they can offer some help if you don't reach out or if you don't feel like you have the resources to reach out for a mental health professional. But the mental health professional would be the ideal space to go into.
All right. Thank you so much. That was a wealth of information. We're going to go ahead and close out for today. We thank you. We do hope that you were at least able to get an ATM at the moment, something that you can do at the moment. This is the Money Therapy Journal. Anything that you take care of will become more beautiful. That includes your money.